Hello, animators and artists, and welcome to another Toon Boom interview. Joining us today is Matt Watts. Matt is an accomplished self taught animator and rigging artist based out of Utah, who not only has a decade of freelance work under his belt, but also came recommended by his colleagues from his TV production work in Canada. He recently joined the team at Digital Gravy Animation. We invited Matt onto the stream to discuss his work on the rigs that we are using in our introduction to rigging, advanced rigging, as well as cutout animation courses, and to answer questions about what studios look for from rigging artists. Matt, welcome to the stream.
Hi, thanks, and thank you everybody that's joining us. It's great to have you here.
Matt, what was your experience like entering the animation industry, and what interested you about this line of work?
So I'll try to give it real quick. I have always loved drawing and doing art since I was a kid, but I also love math. So when I got to university, I went into architecture and I got that degree. And I ended up working in an architecture firm, and I found that I would throw all my passion into the days when I would get to draw people walking around in the buildings that we rendered. And I thought, man, if I could just have a job where I get to do the passion part of what I love to do, that would be great. And I saw people at that architecture firm, they lived and breathed architectural designs. That's what got them up in the morning. That's what they would read magazines about. But for me, it was cartoons and character design that got me going. And so I was very blessed to get a job at an online training company that hired me as an artist for them. And it was up to me to keep pushing myself forward. I was the only artist there for a long time. And so if I wanted to improve, it was going to be me studying and figuring out how to get better. And so I read a ton of books. I took some community college art classes. I took some online classes. And I think the place where I had some of my biggest growth is I would go to comic conventions, animation conventions like CTNX and Lightbox Expo. Now we have that to go to. And when I would go there, I would find these professionals, and some of them were very kind to spend time with me to look at the demo that I brought. And then they would give me feedback. And then for a year, I'd go home and I would practice and try to do better. And I'd come back the next year and I would ask how I had done. And so that's how I was able to learn and grow and get into the field. And as I was at the animation conferences, that's where I came across meeting Toon Boom and getting some connections so that I was ultimately able to get an animation job in Canada working for one of the big studios. And that was when my dreams came true. It felt like I finally got to breathe life into characters using Harmony, and I love it. Every time I get to use Harmony, it gives me a thrill.
And we were talking a little bit earlier about your introduction to Harmony. So what brought you to our software?
When I was in the architecture program at the University of Utah, it was a very demanding program, and we didn't get a lot of sleep. And I kind of wanted to make a home video about what it was like to be an architecture student. And some of the stuff I had to animate. I simply couldn't capture it on film. And so I looked for software, and I found Toon Boom Studio, and it offered an automated lip sync feature. I was looking at the other software that was out there, and they didn't have that. And so that was the tipping point for me choosing Toon Boom Studio back in the day. And so I started to use the software, and I finally got kind of comfortable with it. I learned it by reading the help manuals, all the documentation, and finding any YouTube videos I could. This was back in 2006. There was not a whole lot of stuff back then. And I knew that there were shows on TV that I really enjoyed that were made using the Toon Boom software. And so I would watch those shows frame by frame and study to try to figure out what was happening. And I would meet people at the animation and comic conventions, and I would ask them for tips on how to get to that level. And so that's where I got introduced to Toon Boom, was all the way back in 2006.
Yeah, so this is going to be a very expansive question, but Matt, what is a character rig?
So I'd love to show you a quick little video that I made. And you're not going to be able to hear the sound, but I'm going to I want to talk about pin clasp puppets. Can you guys see my screen? My
Yes, we're
weird
able to see your
on my
screen.
face? Okay. So you remember in elementary school, we'd make pin clasp puppets. We would like draw on a piece of paper and cut these pieces out, and then you could put little pins in them, and then you could rotate them. And so you've got pivot positions and the different drawing parts. And every once in a while, you could even make different parts so that you could swap some of them out. So let's say you wanted some muscle arms or a confused face, and you could replace those pieces. And so this is kind of what we're doing in Toon Boom Harmony. Sorry, I'll just click that off. But in Toon Boom Harmony, we've got a character, and it's all a whole bunch of individual pieces that we've cut with pivot points, and we can rotate everything. So it's just like it was back in the grade school days doing those pin clasp puppets. The nice thing about using a rig like this is that you can do many different drawing swaps for the pieces. So I've got a whole bunch of hands that I've drawn here. We have a bunch of mouths that we've drawn, and we can access all of those. And so it's really nice using a cutout rig because we can save ourselves a lot of time and work by reusing things that we've already done, which is much more difficult to do in frame-by-frame hand-drawn animation, where you would ink and paint every single cell of animation. So yeah, that's an advantage to using this.
Yeah, and we're talking earlier about how you like to organize drawing substitutions, especially for hands.
Yes. So let me show you. Whoa, there's the shark. Let me go to something that looks a little better. Okay. So let's look at the hands. So it is very easy to have too many hands and have them unorganized. Whenever you make a new drawing on a layer in Harmony, it's by default, it will name it 1, and next will be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I've worked on rigs where there's hundreds of hands, and they're not organized all that well. And it can be very difficult to find what you need, or if what you need is even there. And so it can take a lot of time to flip through all the drawings and see if what you need is there, and you lose some time. So I find that if you can organize them in a way that makes sense to the rigging artist and the animator, it can save everybody a lot of time. So what we did here in the shark rig, as well as in the punk rig, is we went ahead and used 4 different prefixes. We used carry underscore, default underscore, point underscore, and then fist underscore. And finally, we use X underscore, a 5th prefix, for anything extra that doesn't fit into those first 4 categories. But most of the hands will fit into those first 4 from my experience. And the nice thing about doing it this way is when you're using the bracket keys, which are the shortcut keys to access different drawing swaps, you'll see that it kind of rotates in a 360 fashion. So you can know what's going to come next. And let me also show you how this can help you with drawing a new hand. Let's say that you had this hand. This is just the default 90 degree. I just want to point out what we're doing here is the default 0 degree hand has this angle on it, and the carry 0 degree hand has the same angle on it. So we're naming it with a suffix of how many degrees of rotation. So let me just show you a quick example of how this can help. So here with the default hand, I'm going to go in my drawing view, and I'm going to go to frame 2, and I'm going to create an empty drawing, and I am going to show my onion skin, Alt-O, so I can see the previous drawing. So that was the hand. That was the 90 degree default hand. So now if I wanted to draw a 90 degree pointing hand, I already have that as a reference. And I can quickly, let me turn that off, I can quickly figure out the best way to draw an on-model hand because it would fit into that organization system. So then I would just rename it as point underscore 90. I already have a 90, so I'm going to call this 91. And then it fits right in here to this organization system to save everybody a lot of time.
In your view, what are some of the benefits to animating with rigs?
So again, what I love about it is how much you can reuse what you've already done. For example, I'm going to press undo a bunch of times, and I will show you that we went ahead and made some poses, some dynamic poses of this shark, and we saved them here at the end of the timeline. So if we ever have a scene where he needs to be in one of these positions, it is very fast to be able to pull these up, and we can copy the keyframes and the drawing substitutions to the scene that we're working on. So sometimes doing a pose like this could take, an hour or two to get it to look this how you want it to be. And so that's time saved in the future. When you're working on a feature, you can potentially save as many poses as you want to the end of your timeline and then copy those in. So at the end of your series, you have tons of poses that are ready to go. And I would even recommend that when you start getting a lot of poses, go ahead and group them all together. So if you have a sequence of running poses, keep those all together, the walking poses all together, neutral poses all together. Um, that's what I love about using Harmony and even just computers. They can help us automate so much of what we do quickly.
Yeah, so today we're going to look at two rigs that you've built, and I think you've shown them both, the Shark and the Punk. And for those of you who are in the chat, you can send us prompts, and Matt will try to pose the rigs in your suggested prompts. So that will be a fun challenge. Matt,
Yes.
how are the Shark and the Punk similar, and how would you say they're different?
So let me show you. I built the Punk rig first, and I decided to go ahead and use what I had made for my own benefit to make my job easier on the Shark. So when I built the Punk, I went ahead, this is the node view, and I know it looks kind of confusing if you haven't seen it before, but as time goes by, this actually gets very nice, and it's delightful to work in. But I want to show you, I'm using backdrops, and that is these giant colored squares that show, I've typed a little prompt in there to tell me what all of this is. So it can be very fast for me to find, this is the head group, inside of the head group, here's all of this stuff that is involved with the face. But from a very broad view, I can be out here and I can see what they all are, and I will show you the benefit of being able to do that. In most rigs, you'll go ahead and pose out the turnaround in the first 5 frames or so. And here, when you're looking at the profile view, it's really difficult for me to see that arm behind the body. And so let me just show you something that we can do. Like, let's say that I wanted to pose that arm out, but half of it's hidden. What I can do is I can come over here in the node view, and I can see, okay, here's the torso. And then the bottom down here, these are called composites. And composites offer us a quick way. If we push D to disable them, we can hide things really quickly. I could hide the waist. I could hide the legs. And then I could focus on animating that arm. And then I could come back in and press A to enable everything. And so that's a benefit of using composites and Harmony. But back to the question, what is similar for the Shark compared to the Punk? So as you'll see, I'm pressing Control F to go full screen here. You can see all of these pieces that I used for the Punk. So once I finished all of this, I selected everything, I pressed copy, and then I went to a brand new empty file for the Shark. And then I went to the node view and I did this. It's called Paste Special. And then I said, with drawings, do nothing. So it would bring the drawings over, the physical little squares in the node view, but it wouldn't bring any of the art from the Punk with it. And so what I did is I was able to use Paste Special, and it was pretty much an empty template that was ready to go. And so I used the same structure. I used all the ground I had already created. The arms are next together and they're red. The legs are next together and they're blue and purple. The waist is green, and I already have all these backdrops. I already have all of this. We call this engineering, all of these cables plugged together. That's all taken care of. And specifically, I want to show you something that usually takes a little time with arms. So here with the shark, I'm going to rotate, and you can see that we've included a little crease for the elbow, and we can push this back in Z depth or Z depth with Alt forward to push this behind, and you can see that we still have a crease right here. And so that arm, like this is the engineering that goes into the arm. There's a little bit of setup involved, but once you've done it once for one character, you can go ahead and do it for your other character as well, so that it will behave the same way and you don't have to redo all of that engineering to get the results that you want. So yeah, those are some similarities. Same with the eyes. Once you've built the eyes in one of them, like here the eye is masked to the white of the eye, you can just build it in one place and then copy it, paste it to the other rig, and it will have that same behavior.
When you design a rig, what material are you given to start off with?
So starting out with a rig, a few things that you want to do that are very important is you want to analyze the storyboards and the animatic or the Leica. That's all of the rough stuff. That gives you an idea of what poses the character is going to need to hit. From that, you're going to know, does this character need to do a whole 360 turn at some point, or is it just going to be the front view or just the quarter front view? And so that is significant. You want to watch through the animatic before you start anything to make sure you're only building this rig and spending your time where you need to. It's easy to fall in love with having fun with all this rigging and build a whole 360, but if the production doesn't need it, don't spend your time and your effort there. All right, so something that is also different between the rigs is the punk we're using for the introductory rigging course, the shark we're using for the advanced rigging course. So there are more features in the shark rig that you are not going to see in the punk rig. For example, I will get to the ballet jump, but let me just show you an example of something that's different here in the shark. We've built some deformer mouths so that you can get any shape that you want with these mouth shapes. And in the punk, we just have cell swaps where you swap them. There's no deformers involved. These are envelope deformers. And you can get lots of stuff using these. And then another advanced rigging technique that I'm going to use right now is the use of master controllers. These were introduced a few versions ago in Harmony. So I am going to go ahead and show them. Let me see. I'm going to collapse my rig. I'm going to copy the starting pose to frame 11. And then I have some swaps here where if I swap them, I'll have a reference for what my master controllers are going to do. Okay, so first thing, I want to go ahead and start with a sketch. I find that all of my work is stronger if I start with a sketch. So I have included this sketch layer. Let me just show you with drawing substitutions. I have this the sketch layer I can click on, and then I can use my brush tool, and I can quickly start sketching what I want. So I'm going to use a blue sketch color and soft lead. That's my favorite. And I'm going to use the light table and draw on top. And I am going to start drawing a sketch of a ballet pose for the shark. All right, so I've got my...
All right, while you're doing that, I'm going to ask you a question from the audience.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for creating a portfolio for a rigging artist? And what are the best ways to showcase your rigs?
Showcasing rigs. I think that's a great question, and I want to know. Because I actually honestly have not done a rigging portfolio or a reel, but I've seen some great examples online where people kind of go through and they show the different features of what they've been able to accomplish in their rig. So the first thing that you want to do is probably show the first 5 frames of the turnaround that you are having. Here, let me show that. You want to show that everything is consistent and it stays in line with each other. So as you can see right here, the bottom of the V of the collar, it stays in a perfect line as it rotates. The bottom of the torso does the same. The bottom of the feet do the same. And that is also a significant part when you're designing the turnaround for a character. You want to make sure that everything lines up so that the character will look like it's turning in a 360 manner. So let me go back to posing this.
And another question we received from the audience is how many hours or days would go into a rig of this complexity?
I'd say this guy took like 60 or 80 hours. And it depends on how complex you need it to be. This was a full 360 with master controllers everywhere. And so it depends on how many views you need. If you're only doing one view, it would take significantly less time, but it wouldn't be as dynamic or able to do as much. And here we wanted to give an example of how to build the biggest, beefiest rig that you can. And so let's see here. Let's see if this is going to be satisfactory. Does that look okay enough for a ballet pose? I don't think it's super strong. Let's see, maybe I'll say one thing that I'm not doing is I'm not looking at a reference. And so that's one of my weaknesses right there. I don't know. Should I look for some reference or should we just go with this?
I think for time we should go with this, but
Okay.
I like the way it's developing.
Okay. So, but just as a rule, that's what I would do is I would look at some references. This is just out of my head. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I've made a pose, and then I'm going to go to my node view, and I'm going to lock the sketch notes layer that I've made so that I can select the rig. So now I am going to, often what I like to do is I like to collapse the rig and copy the starting pose so that on 2 different frames I have the starting pose. I'm going to compare this new pose that I make to the first pose. All right, so with master controllers, these are scripts that we've created ahead of time to help us quickly pose things out. So first I'm going to choose a little bit of a body turn, and now I'm going to choose a little bit of a torso tilt, probably like that. And then I'm going to tilt the shark the other way. I'm going to use peg selection mode. This is an easier way to go when you're posing a rig. Okay. All right, cool. I'm going to use the master peg to move everything up. Going to click on this little handle that I made for the torso. It quickly selects the torso for me. All right. And then I am going to use the shoes. Let's see here. I made some master controllers for the shoes so I can get any angle I want really quickly. All right, let's use that angle there. That angle's probably good. Blinks, I was thinking I would have him have the shark doing like a happy set of blinks there, like just really having a fun time. And then let's choose a mouth. So I've built this whole system for, whoa, that looks freaky, doesn't it? Here, let me choose my front view instead of my profile view. And I'm going to choose an expression, a happy expression for this shark. Okay. All right, so I've already got that. Let's go ahead and move this mouth down a little bit. Oh, that looks fun. I'm going to use the deformers to get a little bit more of a dynamic position on that mouth. Usually I find it adds a lot of character if you don't have the mouth symmetric all the time, if you make it slightly less symmetric. Okay. Then I've got these handles to quickly grab the arm. Oh, that even looks a little bit more. I was optimistic with how long that arm would be. Let's see here. And then I could use deformers to get that leg to be what I want. I want to show you guys something I'm going to use really fast, and it's easier to show it on a different part of my timeline. We built this shark so that there's a few different versions of the arms. So one of the arms, let me just show you the drawing substitutions. It will make it a little bit more clear for you. So these arms are synced together. That means that whenever we swap the upper arm, it's also going to swap the lower arm. So for example, right now I swap the upper arm and it swaps both of those pieces at the same time because they're synced. So in the drawing substitution window, we'll see that there's a 2-piece arm, a 2-point arm, a 4-point arm, and a 6-point arm for different uses. So right here, the default arm has 2 pieces where you could move the forearm independently and Z depth, Z depth nudge it so that it can layer in front of the body, and you could push this behind the body. Then there's this arm that it's kind of like a spaghetti arm. I call this the 2-point arm, where you can quickly just do some fast action. This is what I'm going to use on the ballerina pose. You've got a 4-point arm where you can do like a smear frame if you want. These are envelope deformers put around the art. And the original art just looks like this. And we've just used keyframes and the deform points to get this shape. And finally, we have a 6-point arm where you could do something if you wanted to like give them a big muscle or something. You can just customize this art to get what you need. So we've done that also with the leg. You've got a few different versions of the leg. So I am going to go back to this ballerina pose, and I am going to use the 2-point for everything. Because this will just be a lot faster to manipulate. All right, cool. So now we can get these nice, graceful, strong curves. I don't have to mess with too much stuff here. I'm not going to spend a whole lot more time because I want to get to a few more things, but I just want to give you an idea of what can be done here. And I'm actually using a vertical mouse, which takes a little bit of getting used to, but I find that when I use a vertical mouse, I can actually work for 14 hours a day without my wrist getting tired or sore. And so...
yeah, RSI is a killer.
Yeah, yeah. So anyways, that's really not a great ballerina pose, but I think it gives you an idea of what you can do with the deformers and the master controllers. Master controllers are fantastic. And then what I would do is I would come in here to the node view, and I would turn off my sketch because it's kind of hard to see exactly what's going on there. Turn that off, and then I can go forward and backward a frame to see if my character still looks like it's on model. And I think, yeah, it still looks like the same shark. Good enough. I just go back and strengthen the pose a little bit, put that hand behind the arm, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
When I was first shown this rig in action, one of the things that stood out to me was how it didn't look like a typical cutout rig. It looked like it. If you told me that it was frame by frame, I would have believed it. And you showed some of the reasons why this stands out. Is you had an arm that can do a smear frame, and you have a few other tricks too. One of which is sketching out the poses ahead of time. And then moving the rig to those poses. So what are some of the strategies for making a cutout character look a little bit more like it was hand-drawn?
Yeah, so that's a really fantastic question, and I'm so delighted to hear that it looked like frame by frame, because that's usually the goal, right? So I want to show you specifically on the punk how we were able to make the punk do that. So naturally, when I'm going to collapse the rig here, pressing 0, and I am going to paste the keyframes to this frame, paste some here. I find that something that a lot of cutout animators might start off by doing is if they wanted the torso to tilt, they might do this, and they might do this. And then they'd go ahead and maybe do that. And so now I'm going to tween. I'm going to add motion keyframes, and you can see that the computer's helping me get my in-betweens. But this pose looks really stiff and unnatural. Going from that to that, that's not how a human would turn. You'd see a little bit of perspective on the face. You'd want to go ahead and move each of the pieces individually, like shrink that down, move this over, scoot it up, move every single piece of the hair, and then you're going to start to get a more realistic looking turn. So that's what I found the trick is and that I've learned over the years from many people, is that whenever you're in cutout animation and you rotate a parent group, you want to rotate everything underneath it or move it somehow or touch it up. And I will go ahead and show you that in practice. So we make it a habit in our Toon Boom rigs to leave a place on the timeline for hidden features. So we tell people what they might miss out on, like those extra kinds of arms, or wow, we made a belly button, and you wouldn't have known that unless you moved the shirt that way. And so we like to show even here, this is like the back cuff of the arm, where we could put that behind this. I'm using deformers to show that part. But when I was testing out this rig, I was trying to pose it into some dynamic poses to see if we could make the punk do what it needs to do. And so when I first posed it, this is what it looked like. Now you can see this looks kind of stiff. You know, you wouldn't draw that, what is it, like 72-degree angle with that stiff straights if you were illustrating it yourself on a piece of paper. It would be more curved and natural looking, right? So what I did is I went ahead and I got on my sketch layer and I kind of sketched over, okay, I want to add a little bit more curvature to that foot. I'm going to, you know, make this a fist instead of wide open hands. And then I ended up with a pose that looked like this. I'm going to go full screen so you can see it a little bit better. Now I'm going to go back and forth. You see here I added what looks much more natural than these stiff looking cutout pieces, and we can get these by using deformers around those. So they start off as simple tubes, but we can use the deformers, the envelope deformers, to get whatever shape we need to make it look much more natural than it usually does. And I would say, I know that sometimes as an animator in a studio, you might not have a nice big drawing tablet that you're working on to do this kind of sketch or draw over. And so what you can do is you can even just draw something like this on a piece of paper and use that as a guide on how to get some more energy, lines flowing through, and how to pump up your pose. Here even, look at the sock. You see how it's nice and it's just straight? And then when I had drawn it and thought about, you know, perspective and how it would curve, I added some curve there with the deformers that we set on it. So yeah, draw overs help so much to get your rig to look more natural. And then once you have done a few poses, like we said before, go ahead to the end of your timeline and save it there so that you've got some poses that are ready to go, that look dynamic, and they don't look like cutout animation.
So we had a guest appearance from my cat a second ago, so that was fun. We have a question from the audience, which is, are there any requirements for the advanced rigging courses, or what should you be able to know before applying?
I would highly recommend that you're pretty familiar with the tools in Harmony. Let me give a suggestion. I think it's even worth me Googling it here just to show you. When you're on the Toon Boom Learn portal, you can just type it in here, Toon Boom Learn Portal Journey. If you type that in, then you will go and find some wonderful resources that are ready to go for you on the Toon Boom website. These are free. There's the Rigging Artist Journey. You could click into that, and there's 4 modules in getting around Harmony. Do not skip that if you are new. Well, actually, probably don't even skip it if you're experienced. And then I would recommend going through these resources. There's videos and they're very well explained. There's a few things in here that are outdated building techniques, but I think it would give you enough practice and familiarity that you would be ready to take the advanced rigging course. We've also got a great intro to rigging course that'll have you build the punk first, with the advanced course showing how to build the shark later with master controllers. But the punk, you're still going to get envelope deformers and drawing swaps and how to do most of what you would need for a rig. So yeah, I would highly recommend going through these. And the reason I say don't skip getting around in Harmony Premium, like I said, I learned Toon Boom way back in the day, a long time ago, when I was just reading the help manuals to get me to where I wanted to be, the help topics. And so it was frustrating. It didn't act like the other software perfectly the way I would expect it to. And after, 6 years of trying to do it on my own, I finally went back and I went back to those basics, and I found some really beginner things that I had missed because I didn't start with the building blocks. And then once I had gotten past those, and sometimes I'd watch one of the videos and it was something I totally understood, so I could skip that. But I found it very valuable to go through the beginner level stuff. I would also recommend that you get used to the Harmony shortcuts as they are, the Harmony flavor, as they call it. Up here, edit, preferences. You can choose what preference set you want to use. Oh, yeah. And then there's keyboard shortcuts as a separate window where you can choose what set of shortcut keys you want. And I would recommend using Toon Boom Harmony. You can use Adobe Flash where V is your black selector tool and things like that, but there are reasons that everything is mapped to the keyboard the way it is by default. And once you get familiar with the shortcut keys that Toon Boom has designed that way, I think that you'll be happier because you'll have workflows that your hand is comfortable doing and staying in certain places of the keyboard to do. And then, once you've mastered it, go ahead and customize all you want. And I would give you another pointer there. I learned the defaults, and then after that, I realized, the pencil tool, pressing Alt / is kind of a stretch for my left hand to get to, and I have to look down every time I do it. So I programmed it something to be over in the ASDF area so that I never have to look down when I want to use my pencil tool. Same for using forward and back a keyframe or forward and back a frame. Those are usually like semicolon and apostrophe, comma, and period. I find that it's more helpful for me as a rigging artist and a cutout animator to put those shortcuts over in the ASDF area, where some of the default shortcuts are helpful for traditional or tradigital animation workflows. So yeah, the whole process is personal. Find what you're using a lot and optimize your workflow so it works that way.
Matt, when you design a rig, what are some common problems that you need to solve?
So I say that when I get a rig, it's like Christmas for me. It is so much fun to get to try to figure out what needs to be done for the rig. I'm going to go ahead and show you one of my first steps that I took here on this punk. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and enable the turnaround. Okay, let me maximize my screen here. So here was the turnaround we received from the artist, and thankfully everything lines up. It's a really appealing character, lots of fun. So what I do is I go through and I kind of write, okay, I need a bandage here. I'll have a flipped invisible bandage available here on this other side in case we ever flip the rig. I've got the ear detail, the sleeve. I would put a back sleeve here. So I just kind of go ahead and write down all the stuff that I want to work. here was one thing that was a little tricky. How am I going to make the shin so that I've got skin showing below it, but a pants showing above it? You know, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to invert cut the cuff, and blah blah blah, technical words that probably you don't want to hear yet. and so this is a very important step. This is called breaking the rig down, or analyzing it. And I noticed while I was going through this was the initial rig, where you see these shoes, they kind of just meld in with the shin. This was the original design. Now, I think this looks very appealing and I like it, but building it, if you were to rotate this thing, it's going to look like the character has a broken foot. And so I went back and I suggested to the character designer, could we do something different so that we don't have this issue that will take kind of a complex building technique to achieve? And so, we drew something else, and we ended up with shoes that, they don't dive into the foot like they were boots as they originally did. That was just to make it easier. In an advanced rigging course, sure, we could go ahead and talk about how that would be achieved. And then one other thing to notice is the first time we did the punk, the sleeve was coming down to about right here where the elbow was. We call these points of rotation articulation points. So it's a circle. It's just where it would rotate. I would caution you to try to keep things out of that area as much as possible. One time I was rigging a character that had a tattoo going through the elbow, and it was a little bit of a nightmare to get it to work. We got it to work. Toon Boom can handle it, but trying to manipulate it for the animators was a little challenging. So you're just looking for what you anticipate would be a problem and trying to solve it ahead of time. And then I would also say one of the best places to troubleshoot your rig is, like I said, go ahead and do some practice poses before you call it done. Make sure that you can get nice, smooth poses that are appealing. Usually when you're testing out the rig and you have to move every single point, you'll start to see, oh no, I forgot to set my pivots. They're in the center of the screen. I've got to do that before it moves to the animation process. And so I would make sure that you save some time for yourself to do some dynamic posing so that the animators are going to have an easier time. And for that sake, I would say that it's very important to give your rig to somebody else. Let them play around with it and see what they think, because they might see that you have some really convoluted, complex way of achieving something, and it could be simplified. And it's easy when you're spending 40, 80 hours on a rig to just kind of get lost in the details. And so it's good to have another pair of eyes help you out.
I saw we had a question in the chat from Tony Ross, and Tony's asking, how do you time out your poses for animating rigs, like turning the head?
Awesome. Tony, glad that you're here. Really enjoyed your live stream last week. Great teaching tips I got from that. Okay, so posing things out on the timeline. Let's go for the shark. I think that it will be most instructive for you. So here, what we did is we wanted there to be a 360 turn for this character. And so on your timeline, it's great to go ahead and just keyframe all of your poses here on the first 5 frames. And we like to go ahead and use these scene markers. Frame markers. Let me just show you. If you right click, you can choose mark frame, and then you can choose red. And then you can copy this further down the timeline. This is an easy signal that you're using the front facing starting pose. I can copy that here and paste it on frame 81. And then from 81 to 90, so 90 is my quarter front view, there I have gone ahead and posed out this 360 turn. So I've given myself like 10 different, I've put 10 frames in between those poses. And then I went ahead and I nailed down this arm. I'll go through and fix any problems. As you can see right now, this arm, it looks nice and smooth. It goes around the edge of the body, and all of a sudden it's behind it. And I had to nail those keyframes down. Before I went through and adjusted that, when it was just pure interpolation, this is what it looked like. And so what I did is I went to the middle and I brought the arm out to here, and then I went to the next frame and I used Z depth, Z depth to nudge it forward. And so I just made it much more smooth for where there were issues, where it would pop. And so I did the same thing here. You'll notice that as I'm approaching the profile with the mouth, I could bring the mouth over here and it would still look okay, right? And then as soon as it hits the profile view, I now have a separate set of mouth pieces that are cutting through the edge of the body. But here it's a different cell swap, and now here it's swapped. And then for the back view, we have that cutting out from the body. And so as you can see, we've posed out all of these keyframes, and there's cell swaps that happen throughout it here. And then let me just give you an idea. Yeah, we use deformers all over the place. And so it's nice because then you don't have to redraw everything. You can get everything to be custom. For example, let me just show you with the collar. You could go ahead and get a nice shape, anything you need, and you don't have to draw a new one. So that's nice. Let's keep going through this. A few people were impressed by the shark being able to look like it was moving in 360. Let me show you the head tilts, okay? So here I've got the shark doing some torso tilts up, and then we've got it on both sides. And then I also have the shark doing some torso tilts through the center, and then some torso tilts that are downward. Now, trying to figure out how a bullet-shaped object would foreshorten in this way was challenging to me. And so I went ahead and I did this. I built in Blender, I built this bullet-shaped body, and I just kind of did a rough painting of his clothes onto this shark. And then I went ahead and imported this object into Harmony, and I rotated it, and I got an idea of what it would look like as it tilted every way. And then once I got the idea of what it would look like, I would do a sketch over to make sure that it looked a little bit more appealing and not so clinical the way that it looked when it was 3D. So I used that as an assistant tool in helping me to get these angles. And then here down the timeline, we've got a bunch of blinks for each of the three main positions, the front, the quarter front, the profile. And then we went ahead and did the lip sync. So you've got happy mouths, neutral mouths, sad mouths for the front, happy, neutral, sad for the quarter, and same for the profile. And finally, you've got reusable poses at the end. And this part here in the middle, these are all the hidden pieces. And usually there's a little explanation of what is going on. Here on the sketch notes layer, I went ahead and I explained why all these pieces are here. Notice that we even have a shoulder swap. It's a totally separate piece that can make it look like the arm is in front of the suspenders, but it's rare that it needs to be.
Whenever we share a video clip of a rig with a rotating piece in it, people always ask, is it 3D or how does it work? And the answer is it's all 2D geometry. But I really found it fascinating that you used 3D reference for making the rig.
Awesome. Yeah. Whatever tools I can use to help me, it's great. And, something else that I want to encourage people to do is using handles can be really helpful. So these are just little pieces that I was so confused the first time I saw it in a video, but let me just show you. What you do is you have a piece that shows up here in the working view called the OpenGL view. But then if you click on render, those aren't showing up. And so what we're doing is we're creating these little handles to help us. For example, the eyelid's there, but you can't see it. And now when I start moving it up, I can see it. But that handle, this little tab that we created, is available there. And it's simply what's happening is we're using visibility nodes, and we put them underneath these tabs that we create. And then we say we don't want to see it when we render, but we do want to see it in the OpenGL view. And so we've made plenty of things like this to help us quickly find, like, here's the lower teeth, I can bring them up. Here's the tongue, I can bring it up. And so, yeah.
So we have about 10 minutes left, and I can see that one of our audience members is really curious about what types of rigs, or what types of nodes do you use most often in a 360 rig?
Okay. Let me get you started by saying with the arm, I think that if you can build an arm, you're mostly on your way there. We like to use overlay, underlay, line art, color art. So here, what happens is you can separate these different pieces. I'm actually just going to show it to you really quick. So here I am on the upper arm. I'm going to go to the drawing view, so it's a little easier to see what's going on. So on the color art, we've got the color. On the line art, we've got the outline. And then on the overlay, we have, we've copied some of that black outline up here to the overlay. And we say that we want to see these elbow creases in certain times. And so what we do is I'm going to blow this up. I'm going to ungroup this. Woohoo, there's a lot of fun stuff going on. We've got overlay layer filters. I'm going to add a display. That's Command Y, Control Y. And I'm going to go to the camera view. And then I'm going to switch to display number 2. Let's see, display 2. Now, as you can see, the forearm, by default, it shows all 4 of those. Come on. Sorry, it's okay. By default, all of those line art, color art, overlay, underlay, all of those 4 sublayers are showing through. And so what we're doing is we're going into the node library, and we're going to filter, isolate, and there's all of these that help us to isolate different things. There's line art, isolation, overlay, underlay. And so I'll just show you that once you feed a cable into one of those, this is an overlay, we're only seeing that much. Auto patch, we're only seeing this much. Line art, color art. So we're using all of these sublayers, these isolate nodes, to help us to put the lines in front of something. Here, I'll just show you. Here's the line art. And then we're telling it we want the line art to get cut by the auto patch of the upper arm. So I know that sounds like a lot of stuff, but we're just saying we want this color portion to be masking out that completed line that's usually there. So tons of those, tons of cutters, and the visibility thing like I showed you with handles or tabs. Those are a lot of the things that you want to be using. And it's also a good idea to use the displays to help you so that you can just look at a certain part of the rig at a time so that you don't have everything showing at once. It can be confusing to see everything. Any more questions from people?
Yeah, there's one really good question that I'd like to squeeze in.
Okay.
How often do you need a full 360 rig, and what are the criteria for deciding whether or not you want to use one?
So I find that for the projects I work on, I do a lot of commercials with digital gravy, and we often do not need a 360 rig, so our time is best spent elsewhere. It depends on how much you're going to use it. So I'm developing my own little character that I use on Instagram. Might as well pull it up right now so you can see it. So this character, and I want it to be a 360 rig because I'm going to be using him on my intros for lots of videos and Instagram. And like I said, once you've animated something and you've made these poses that take so long, you can quickly reuse them in the future. And so you get this huge reusable library of poses and assets as you build out a full character. But like I said, it could take you like 80 hours to build this robust rig that can do everything that's 360. Or maybe it could take you like 8 or 10 hours to build just the front view or just the quarter view. One other key that I would tell you about rigging is in other software, you might be used to rigging a separate rig for the front view, a separate rig for the quarter view. Here, what is significant in Harmony is that we are just we start building the front view, and then we group the arm, we group the leg, and then we clone it. Clone drawings only is what we use. And if you want, I've made tutorials you can watch on my YouTube, and we've got other great tutorials about this on the Learn portal. But you can reuse so much of what you've done. So whenever I'm building a 360 rig, I always start on the front view first, and I try to build everything I know that'll be symmetric, and I clone it and put it on the other side. And that way I can copy and paste anything I've done on this side to this side. And the hand banks are both updated. If I ever draw a new drawing substitution in one hand, it's automatically available in the other. So save yourself some time by reusing as much as you possibly can.
And my last question for you is, what do you hope artists can learn by studying the rigs that you build for our courses?
So something that I value a lot is it drives me nuts when there's duplication of effort. So the rigging artist is like an elf in Santa's workshop and spends all of their life building these wonderful rigs, and the animators don't even get the full concept of what's there. So I think it's very helpful if there's something you can learn, please leave notes for people so that they can understand how to use your rig. And leave a note on anything that's new or different. If you're using a new node in Harmony 20 that hasn't been there before, explain it. We use an image switch here. You can look that up later if you like. And there's also a way to leave notes in the rig. If you push enter in the node view in Harmony 20, you can type note, push enter, and then you could leave a note and say, this is a note. So leave things like that to help explain what you've done, because in production, you usually don't get a chance to personally say, oh, here, let me show you the rig. So if you can include that stuff in there ahead of time, great. And then just reuse as much as you possibly can and organize hands and feet and things so that it makes sense to people, and they're organized in a way that is clean.
All right, Matt, where can our viewers find you on the web?
Well, thanks for asking. My favorite place to stay alive on the web is Instagram. I put all my sketches and posts and things there. YouTube, I've been posting a bunch of tutorials and fun little animations I do. My website is my more professional face, my portfolio kind of work. And then at Digital Gravy, we've got our site, smellthegravy.com, and we're doing awesome stuff using Harmony, and we'd love for you to take a look at what we're doing there.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody, including my cat, for joining us in today's stream. For anyone who's interested in learning more about rigging in Harmony, our remote training courses are now available for registration. You can sign up at toonboom.com/training to learn more about rigging, animation, compositing, and more. And be sure to join us next week for Collaboratory with Mike Morris. We will be taking your prompts and turning them into a storyboard. So until next week.